Thank you for having me, Myron, and hello to all my friends at the USIBC Ideas Summit. It was just over a year ago, it seems like a long time, that many of us met in Washington, right before my visit to New Delhi. That trip deepened the partnership between our two countries immensely. I know you're used to hearing that we're the oldest and most populous democracies in the world. That's true, and it's important. It's important to reiterate. We share a reverence for freedom, rule of law, and human rights that runs deep. And that's important. As I said in Delhi, the United States desires a new age of ambition in our relationship. We don't just interact on a bilateral basis. We see each other for what we are: great democracies, global powers, and really good friends. India is one of a few trusted, like-minded countries whose leaders I call on a regular basis for counsel and collaboration on issues that span continents. I'm grateful in particular to Minister Jaishankar for his friendship and for his sage advice. It's important. It's important that democracies like ours work together, especially as we see more clearly than ever the true scope of the challenge posed by the Chinese Communist Party. Our infrastructure projects, our supply chains, our sovereignty, and our people's health and safety are all at risk if we get it wrong. The recent clashes initiated by the PLA are just the latest examples of the CCP's unacceptable behavior. We were deeply saddened by the deaths of 20 Indian service members. I'm confident that with our concerted efforts, we can protect our interests. I especially commend India's recent decision to ban 59 Chinese mobile apps, including TikTok, that present serious security risks for the Indian people. And I'm happy to report that India is a rising U.S. defense and security partner in the Indo-Pacific and globally. In December, Defense Secretary Esper and I hosted the second ever 2+2 dialogue with our Indian counterparts. The United States has never been more supportive of India's security. India, too, is an important partner in a key pillar of President Trump's foreign policy: multilateralism that actually works. We work closely together to make sure that the World Intellectual Property Organization election was won by someone who respects property rights. Seems pretty basic. We've revived the so-called Quad, comprised of the U.S., India, Japan, and Australia. India is also part of a group of like-minded nations that I've convened regularly to advance shared interests. We've also invited Prime Minister Modi to the next G7, where we'll advance the Economic Prosperity Network. It's a group of countries and organizations that we consider natural partners because we share values like democracy and transparency and the rule of law. On a similar note, India has a chance to attract global supply chains away from China and reduce its reliance on Chinese companies in areas like telecommunications, medical supplies, and others. India is in this position because it has earned the trust of many nations around the world, including the United States. We also want to work with India to advance the Blue Dot Network, an initiative to promote high-quality, transparent infrastructure development. This effort is crucial to adopt because free markets are the best way to lift people out of poverty. India has seen that in its own recent past. That's an especially vital truth to remember today, because the private sector will be indispensable in overcoming the economic damage caused by the pandemic that began in Wuhan, China. But, as I said last year, to achieve these worthy goals, India will need to encourage an environment that is more open to increased trade and investment. I know that's possible because Indians and Americans share a spirit of hard work and entrepreneurship, and I'm confident our partnership is only getting stronger. Let's emerge from this current challenge more resilient and innovative than before. And let's seize this moment to deepen cooperation between two of the world's greatest democracies. Thanks for having me today. Have a wonderful rest of your summit. So it's a different Chinese Communist Party today than it was 10 years ago, and I think the remarks that President Trump gave on Friday of this past week reflect that. This is a Chinese Communist Party that has come to view itself as intent upon the destruction of Western ideas, Western democracies, Western values. It puts Americans at risk. The list is long, whether it's stealing American intellectual property, destroying hundreds and millions of jobs here in the United States, or their efforts to put at risk sea lanes in the South China Sea, denying commercial traffic the opportunity to move through armed encampments in places that China has no right to be. The list of actions from the Chinese Communist Party is long, and for the first time, For the first time, we have a president of the United States who's prepared to push back against that and protect the American people. I want to mention briefly, too, an upcoming meeting General Secretary Xi is having with leaders in Africa on COVID-19. We've taken note of the very modest financial donations that China and so-called private Chinese entities have dispersed in Africa. China's contributions to fighting the pandemic are paltry compared to the financial and human costs of the cover-up that it engendered. And I note, too, our concern that China will exploit the pandemic as a pretext to continue its opaque lending practices that have led nations to debt and disappointment all throughout Africa. The United States has done and will continue to do enormous good work in Africa. PEPFAR has saved millions of African lives, and the U.S. is sustaining multiple programs in Africa to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll continue this remarkable humanitarian work as a reliable, transparent, and steadfast partner to our many African friends. Last week, I was humbled and honored to meet with several survivors of the Chinese Communist Party's massacre at Tiananmen Square that happened 31 years ago. I also released a statement on China's obscene attempts to take advantage of our domestic situation to press their political agenda, which I'm sure many of you saw. There is no equivalence between our two forms of government. We have the rule of law, China does not. We have free speech and embrace peaceful protest, they don't. We defend religious freedom, as I just noted. China continues its decades-long war on faith. The contrast couldn't be more clear. During the best of times, China ruthlessly imposes communism. And amidst the most difficult challenges the United States faces, we work to secure freedom for all.
Do you think they intentionally released that virus, or it was an accident in the lab?
I don't have anything to say about that. I think there's a lot to know. But I can say this. We've done our best to try and answer all of those questions. We tried to get a team in there. The World Health Organization tried to get a team in there, and they have failed. No one's been allowed to go to this lab or any of the other laboratories. There are many labs inside of China, Martha. This risk remains. This is an ongoing challenge. We still need to get in there. We still don't have the virus samples we need. This is an ongoing threat, an ongoing pandemic, and the Chinese Communist Party continues to block access to the Western world, the world's best scientists, to figure out exactly what happened. So I can't answer your question about that because the Chinese Communist Party has refused to cooperate with World Health experts.
We must acknowledge a set of facts about who and what we're dealing with. And I think we're seeing this. I think all across the world, this is becoming more apparent each and every day. The Chinese Communist Party decreed an end to freedom in Hong Kong, violating a UN-registered treaty and the rights of its citizens. One of just many international treaties that the Chinese Communist Party has violated. General Secretary Xi has greenlighted a brutal campaign of repression against Chinese Muslims, a human rights violations on a scale we have not seen since World War II. The PLA has escalated border tensions. We see them today in India, the world's most populous democracy. We watch as it militarizes the South China Sea and illegally claims more territory there, threatening vital sea lanes.
General Secretary Xi promised he would not militarize the South China Sea. In 2015, in the Rose Garden, he militarized the South China Sea. They made a promise, a 50-year commitment, an internationally recognized agreement between China and the United Kingdom and Hong Kong, that there would be one country and two systems, and he's now fundamentally violated that. Every place the Chinese Communist Party, they made commitments under the Paris Climate Accord that they're not remotely close to complying with. This is a Chinese Communist Party that is acting in a way that poses real threats to the world, and the United States is going to respond in each of those venues to make sure that we preserve American national security and impose costs on the Chinese Communist Party in order to achieve the change in behavior that will have the good outcomes. We want a free and open Indo-Pacific. The Chinese Communist Party continues to treat that body of water as its own maritime empire. We're not going to allow that to happen. As Ambassador O'Brien explained so well, we have to keep in mind that the CCP regime is a Marxist-Leninist regime. General Secretary Xi Jinping is a true believer in a bankrupt totalitarian ideology. It's this ideology that informs his decades-long desire for global hegemony of Chinese communism. America can no longer ignore the fundamental political and ideological differences between our countries, just as the CCP has never ignored them. My experience in the House Intelligence Committee, and then as director of the Central Intelligence Agency, and my now 2+ years as America's Secretary of State have led me to this central understanding that the only way to truly change communist China is to act not on the basis of what Chinese leaders say, but how they behave. And you can see American policy responding to this conclusion. President Reagan said that he dealt with the Soviet Union on the basis of trust but verify. When it comes to the CCP, I say we must distrust and verify. We the freedom-loving nations of the world must induce China to change, just as President Nixon wanted. We must induce China to change in more creative and assertive ways because Beijing's actions threaten our people and our prosperity. We must start by changing how our people and our partners perceive the Chinese Communist Party. We have to tell the truth. We can't treat this incarnation of China as a normal country just like any other. We know that trading with China is not like trading with a normal law-abiding nation. Beijing threatens international agreements treats international agreements as suggestions, as conduits for global dominance. But by insisting on fair terms, as our trade representative did when he secured our Phase 1 trade deal, we can force China to reckon with its intellectual property theft and policies that have harmed American workers. We know, too, that doing business with a CCP-backed company is not the same as doing business with, say, a Canadian company. They don't answer to independent boards, and many of them are state-sponsored and so have no need to pursue profits. A good example is Huawei. We stopped pretending Huawei is an innocent telecommunications company just showing up to make sure you can talk to your friends. We've called it what it is, a true national security threat, and we've taken action accordingly. We know, too, that if our companies invest in China, they may wittingly or unwittingly support the Communist Party's gross human rights violations. Our Departments of Treasury and Commerce have thus sanctioned blacklisted Chinese leaders and entities that are harming and abusing the most basic rights for people all across the world. The challenge of China demands exertion, energy from democracies, those in Europe, those in Africa, those in South America, and especially those in the Indo-Pacific region. And if we don't act now, ultimately, the CCP will erode our freedoms and subvert the rules-based order that our societies have worked so hard to build. If we bend the knee now, our children's children may be at the mercy of the Chinese Communist Party, whose actions are the primary challenge today in the free world. General Secretary Xi is not destined to tyrannize inside and outside of China forever unless we allow it. Now, this isn't about containment. Don't buy that. It's about a complex new challenge that we've never faced before. The USSR was closed off from the free world. Communist China is already within our borders. So we can't face this challenge alone. The United Nations, NATO, the G7 countries, the G20, our combined economic, diplomatic, and military power is surely enough to meet this challenge if we direct it clearly and with great courage. Maybe it's time for a new grouping of like-minded nations, a new alliance of democracies. We have the tools. I know we can do it. Now we need the will. To quote Scripture, I ask, is our spirit willing, but our flesh weak? If the free world doesn't change, Communist China will surely change us. There can't be a return to the past practices because they're comfortable or because they're convenient. Securing our freedoms from the Chinese Communist Party is the mission of our time, and America is perfectly positioned to lead it because our founding principles give us that opportunity. As I explained in Philadelphia last week, staring at Independence Hall, Our nation was founded on the premise that all human beings possess certain rights that are unalienable, and it's our government's job to secure those rights. It is a simple and powerful truth. It's made us a beacon of freedom for people all around the world, including people inside of China. Indeed, Richard Nixon was right when he wrote in 1967 that the world cannot be safe until China changes. Now it's up to us to heed his words. Today, the danger is clear, and today the awakening is happening. Today, the free world must respond. We can never go back to the past.